Alright, now that I have installed new disks into the system, I have also set up my desktop to include the file manager or Windows Explorer. I have added the disk component, so if we do a search for disk, and this will show up, and obviously our ever famous terminal window. Now before we start doing some commands, I want to show you what the existing environment is with some of the commands and what's going to be changing as we work with the commands. So first I want to do ls-l/dev/sd and then star. Alright, this shows basically the current disks and any partitions. There's yet another utility called lsblk. Does the same thing in a nice nifty format. Now since I'm in my home directory, one of the things I want to do is I want to do the lsblk, and I want to pipe that into the output for disk.txt. Alright, a couple other commands I want to run through as well. We're just going to utilize the command called fdisk-l, right? And you notice that since we don't have elevated permissions, we don't have permissions to look at any of the information there, but you also see that we have disk 1, 2, 3, 4, basically A, B, C, and D is what I have created in the system here. Now another command I want to expose you to is this one. It's called blkid, block ID versus ls block. So if we do block ID, you may actually need to utilize it. Since I was utilizing the utility earlier, you may have to prefix it with sudo to get the appropriate permissions, and then the blkid. And what I want to point out here is this, that once we start creating the partitions, you're going to see basically this, what we call a UUID. Right, so unique ID for that particular partition. You notice currently we have SDA1 and SDA5, since these are the partitions that are created on our main drive here. So here's the primary partition, here's that extended partition, and here is the fifth partition here. So you're able to see this in a graphical format. There's another command called df. It's going to identify the free space that we have. So you see that we have our dev drive, our primary partition, and it's acknowledging how many blocks are utilized and how much are free. And this doesn't really give you a good indication because we don't really work on blocks. So if we did df-h human readable format, you see that the information has changed overall. So again, here's the SDA, our primary partition, and you see how much it's being utilized, and what the total capacity of that is. All right, yet another command. We're going to type in cfdisk. Again, this is going to be a permission issue, so we're going to prefix it with sudo. And there we go. So right now it's just showing us that we have our main disk, and that's the only drive that we have as as our current system. So we just hit quit. Another command, well, it's not really a command, it is actually a file. We're able to see the file. We're going to type in cat etc, and it's going to be fs tab file system table. So when we look at this has some interesting information. We'll be exploring this in detail a little bit later on, and what this is when the computer system starts, these are basically the partitions that get mounted. So as you can see, we have the first partition, SDA, on disk 1 that's being mounted, and the reason I wanted to identify that UUID is because it's being utilized here to automatically mount those particular partitions when the system boots up. Alright, so those are the main commands that I want you to be familiar with. And now let's go back and start looking at creating some partitions on the drives that we have installed. So what I'm going to do is on my disk here, I'm going to select the second disk, right, my 5 gig disk. So you can see that we have some free space here, and also pay attention that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 lines over here. So once we start formatting and partitioning, this information will change. Alright, so the utility to create partitions is going to be fdisk. So I'll just type in fdisk, and the partition that we're working with is going to be /dev/sdb. That's going to be the drive that we're working with. And as you can see that we can't utilize the fdisk utility, and the reason being is we need to have those elevated permissions. So we're going to prefix it with sudo, and now we are actually in the command. Now if you notice that when we're working with various commands, some of the commands are very similar in terms of what letter or what word we utilize for help. They changed it where letter M is going to be for help. So we'll type in M, and the commands that we're going to be utilizing are going to be the following. We're going to be creating a new partition, and then we're going to also utilize the P to print the partition table, basically reviewing the partition table. We're going to then double check things and verify any partitions that are there, and then finally when we're done with the creation of the partitions, in order for everything to get set or created, we need to basically write. Now if there's any time that you get stuck inside this utility, you could always press Control-C, and Control-C is a command identified or used as what we call a break. So for example, if I didn't want to be here anymore, or I started doing a command, let's say I'm going to create something new, but it's like, nope, I don't want to be in this command. You hit Control-C, and basically that exits you out of the command. So let me go back in here. So we're going to do a new partition. All right, first partition we're going to do as a primary partition, and the primary partition number, first sector, we'll leave also at its default. And for this, I'm going to utilize this syntax here. Since I don't know, or be a little bit difficult to calculate how many sectors we're going to utilize, it's just quicker to determine what size you want. So I want this to be a 1.5 gig partition, so I'll do plus 1.5 G. Oops, I added a little period there. So let's do plus 1.5 G. All right, and it's identified that I've created a 1.5 gig partition table. I could also print that out. You notice that we have already one partition that was created there, and it's identified as SDB1. All right, so we're going to create a new partition. This time we're going to create the extended partition. We're going to utilize all of the extended partition. So this is going to be our partition 2. We'll utilize the first sector, and we'll utilize all of the space there. And then once again, we'll type in P, and you notice that we have 2 partitions created here. And the second partition is an extended partition. Now, when I create new, you notice that the only thing I could create in here is going to be a logical partition. I'm going to create 2 new partitions within it. So I'll utilize the default for the first sector, and here I'll utilize plus 1.33 gigs, and then let's do a print on this. So now you notice that I have yet another partition. Now you notice that it jumped from 1 to 5. Now the reason being is, remember, we have up to 4 primary partitions, so it's leaving basically 3, and 4 available for any additional partitions that might be created. So I create new, we'll add another partition. Notice that it's going to be partition 6. We'll utilize all the remaining space. Now if I do a print, you notice that we have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 partitions. 1 is going to be a primary partition as we created, 2 is an extended partition, and then we have 5 and 6, which are logical partitions. Now to save all the information, I'm going to hit W, and now you see that my drive has been all partitioned. Right. The other thing that you might notice is that we have a 5th line, and it broke in right in the middle, and this is basically a master boot record. This is identifying that we have the ability to utilize up to 4 primary partitions.